Today, we begin a sermon series titled Together in This. And I want to start with a question. Why did you come here this morning? Now, going to church is a cultural norm, so it's not as odd, but when you stop and think about it, you got up on a weekend, most of you don't have to work today, got dressed, took a shower, brushed your teeth, or we hope the person sitting next to you did some of those things, and you decided to come here on a Sunday morning. Now, when I stopped and I thought, that's a little bit bizarre that we do this thing called worship together in community. And I thought, I wonder why. There's a reason why we do these things. So I wanted to pose that why question today. Why do we do these things? And I think subconsciously or unconsciously most of the time, the reason we come together in community isn't necessarily to hear the best, most amazing, wonderful sermon you've ever heard in your entire life. I'm sorry to let you down on that this morning. Or even though we have great worship, I don't know that it's just to come and experience worship. I think there's something deeper that includes all of that, transcends that, and includes it. And I would like to propose the reason we do these things is for a deep need of connection. Connection with the divine, however we understand God or the divine, connection with each other human beings that think similarly or on a similar faith journey as us, and connection with the earth, creation, the cosmos. And we don't probably talk about all three of those things enough, and I think those are all interconnected as well. And when those are fractured, one of those are fractured, then they all affect each other. So I think our connection with the Creator, with God, with the divine, with each other, and with the environment, the earth, the cosmos, are all interrelated. Any Brene Brown fans here this morning? Awesome. She wrote a book, several books, but one of them titled Daring Greatly. And in that book, she wrote this: we are psychologically, emotionally, cognitively, and spiritually hardwired for connection, love, and belonging. Connection, along with love and belonging, which are two expressions of connection, is why we are here, and it's what gives us purpose and meaning to our lives. And I read that, and I was like, that just captures so much, I think, of why people come to church, why we desire some sort of worship together with other people. We are wired for connection, which also means we do not experience a sense of meaning when we have disconnection, disruption in any of those, divine, each other, or the earth. And also how we find meaning is by finding that sense of connection. Everybody's tracking with me this morning? I think we all want to believe in something. We all want a cause or causes to feel like our lives matter, to feel like we're a part of something bigger and we're connected with other people on that journey. We want to feel like we're a part of creating something beautiful, that we're creating something meaningful, that we're in this together. And also, I think we want to feel like we're a part of a community that draws the best version of who we are out. And so, how does one church do that? Or what roles does one church play in that? As many of you know, we did this survey at the beginning of this past summer. We sent out a survey to all of the people in our community for multiple different questions that we asked. A lot of it was getting feedback. We were a little over 4 years old. We're a young congregation. We're still 4.5 years old on this journey, and we were trying to figure out who are we as a community. And we wanted people's feedback. And one of the questions we asked in that survey is, if you could describe one church in a sentence or two, how would you describe one church? And so on the next slide, we have Jackie Lefevre's worked on this, and she coded all of the responses in a way that the rest of us could read. Otherwise, you're just looking through like 80-plus surveys. But what we found is this. This is words, descriptions you used to describe one church. Of course, inclusive, accepting, open, welcoming was by far the most frequently used words. Safe for questions and doubts, meets people where they're at, non-judgmental. Those were other common themes. And then you can kind of follow down the line there. And so we began to wrestle as a community and as leadership. What are common themes of why one church exists? A lot of places, they will dictate their sort of reasons why they exist. For us, we asked, why does one church exist? And we wanted to hear from the community. We wanted to get your input to figure out, why are we doing what we are doing? So 3 words that we felt as a leadership team that kind of stood out to us were inclusive, safe, love. 3 words that we felt were on the priority of everybody that reflect who we are: inclusive, safe, and love. And we were wrestling with that why question. Why does one church exist? Anybody here seen the TED Talk by Simon Sinek on why? I forget the title of it, but it wasn't why. Starts with why? Okay, thank you. It starts with why. And he gives 3 concentric circles, right? And the outside is what? And so we knew we are a church, right? That's what we do. That's kind of what we are. But then at the core of the center was this question of why. Why do we do what we do? And so we're wrestling with that over the past 6 months. Just, this is our why. Why are we the kind of church we are? Why does it matter? So, after wrestling with this, we realized, well, inclusive, but that's not why we exist. We don't exist just to be inclusive, although that's part of it. Progressive, people use that word, progressive or open, but we don't exist just to be a progressive community, right? And safe place for questions and doubts, but that's not the why we exist, not just to offer a safe place. But somehow, all of these things matter and they're a part of it. And so, wrestling with why does one church exist, what is our core identity, and how can we say that in a succinct, simple way that reflects what our community says about us. Without further ado, we came up with a simple sentence that I like to read to you now. On the next slide, our why. One church is a safe community that reflects the inclusive love of God. Nothing like big, but this captures, I think, who we are as a community. From your guys' standpoint, why one church exists, what you value of one church. And this, by the way, this phrase was like twice or 3 times as long, and then we no, that's going to be too hard to use, so how do we shorten it to like the bare minimums? So you can see safe, inclusive, love are all part of that. This is our why, as we've discerned it as a leadership team from you guys and from your input. So, in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, one of my favorite stories of Jesus. The religious leaders, the author says trying to trick Jesus, present him with this interesting predicament. They find this woman caught in adultery and throw him at his feet. And they say, hey, the law of Moses, whom you claim to follow, this tradition as a Jew, claims that you should stone this woman here. What say you? Trying to trick Jesus. And Jesus gives what we all know, it's a very common answer, let he or she without sin cast the first stone. And then we read in verse 9 and 11, and you can follow along on the screen. It says, when they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, woman, where are they? And not using the word woman in a condescending way, right? Woman, has no one condemned you? So she said, no one, sir. And Jesus said, neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on, do not sin again. I love this story. I feel like this captures my view of who God is, my view of who Jesus was reflecting, probably almost better than any other story I can think of. But here's a question. What does it say about the Pharisees, the religious leaders, that they would bring this woman and totally humiliate her to prove a point? It says that they were more focused on being right than being loving. They had this sense of superiority about them. In essence, they were driven by their own ego. We've talked about this before, but I think this is a temptation of all people, is our own ego kind of gets in the way sometimes. And even within religion, perhaps especially within religion, it's easy for our ego to be masked and for us to use religion to allow our ego to run the show, isn't it? I think we've all probably seen that. Many of us have been hurt by that, frustrated by that. We've seen that. Richard Rohr, one of my favorite authors and spiritual leaders, says he calls it the religious false self. It's your false self using religion to masquerade. And that's what we see here with the Pharisees. But how does Jesus understand God in this moment? God, not as a God who condemns, not as a God who judges. He doesn't even point out to the other religious leaders. He kind of weighs the situation and then brings people up to a new level, invites them up to a new way of seeing God. Often when I talk about this story with more conservative people, they're very quick. It's almost like the first thing. Yeah, but Jesus said, don't go and sin no more. That's what they want to get to. And I say, that is at the very end of the story. And you can't just skip there. And I feel like for many of us, we've seen, maybe even been a part, I've been a part, if I'm honest, about skipping to that very end too quickly. And here's something I think we learn from this. It is only after an encounter with love and acceptance does God invite us to change. It's only after an encounter with love and acceptance. You could say grace, you could say forgiveness, you could say compassion. It's only after we experience this does God invite us to change. And I think it's less, hey, stop doing that, you wicked, evil person. I think it's an experience of love that then invites her to be the best version of who she can be. Very different way of saying almost the same thing, but very, very different. Are you tracking with me? Yes. I believe that reflects what we try to do here at One Church. And I've heard stories from many of you and from other people that they have experienced something like that here. And so I felt like this reflects, I think, a lot of what we are trying to do. We're trying to create this safe place of unconditional love, which, by the way, we struggle and we do imperfectly. All of us, One Church does, we all do it imperfectly. But that is what we're trying to do here, to create that space and invite people to be the best version of who they can be. They encounter love, God's unconditional love, through you. That's how they encounter God's love, primarily. This last week, I posted on Facebook and I asked how people experience God's love. And everybody's experienced God's love a little bit different, or how they experience connection with God. But two of the major themes were with other people, in conversations, in relationships, whatever, eating with people, through other people, or through nature. And then a few people said music, which I think most of us would agree, music, art would be another one. But most people encounter and experience God's love primarily through other people, primarily through you and I, and being a part of something where they can come and feel accepted and loved and not judged for where they are on their journey, for their sexuality, for their gender, or for their questions and uncertainties about faith. Are you with me? So One Church is a safe community that reflects the inclusive love of God. Love, because I believe that love is the center of who God is. I think it's what holds us here together. We've talked about this idea that people view God differently. Some people wrestle with God as a being. or as one theologian says, the ground of all being, the source of all. How does God interact in the world? What is God's gender? Does God even have a gender? Probably not. And that kind of gets out there, and we're like, well, we have different views, or how God interacts with the world. We all have probably different views and different experiences and how we perceive God interacting with the world. But at the core, we believe that God is love. I think that holds us together. I think most of us here would agree that if God exists, God is love. That's the defining characteristic of God. Inclusion is important because we believe Jesus set this example, that his life was lived in a way that he constantly included people that others excluded. And he constantly seemed to kind of stretch this circle out a little bit wider and wider. And then safe. We make it a priority to be a safe place so you can express where you're at, to be honest with where you're at, to be honest with who you are, to be honest with where you struggle. Every time we meet together, every small group we do together, every social event we do together, always thinking, how do we create a safe place? Parker Palmer, he's an author and leader, educator, and a Quaker, of all things. But he talks about our soul as a wild animal, and he compares it and uses that metaphor, and I find that so helpful. So he talks about our souls as a wild animal, and you don't go out tromping into the woods, right, to find a wild animal, right? You don't scream and shout and make as much noise as you can. You go out quietly, slowly, and you sit next to a tree and you wait. Now, most of our world is people shouting and screaming and tromping around, isn't it? And we wonder why we're so fragmented and why it's so hard to be authentic. Because here's my experience, myself and what I've seen in many of us here is we've been hurt. And there's so many unsafe places. And that what will happen is people will begin to show a little bit of who they are, right? Unless you're at the point where you're like the bottom of the bottom of the bottom, and you have no choice, and then you just, poof, here it is, right? And this is the power, I think, of some AA meetings and different things, because people are like, no more BSing, right? Here you go, here it is. But for most of us, we show a little bit of who we are and see. And here's the thing, if people then offer a ton of advice, if we feel like people are trying to kind of coerce us or tell us what to do, what to believe, whatever, then we feel we automatically register, this is not safe, right? So what do we suck back in. Nope, I'm not going to reveal myself. I've seen this, we all have this tendency. I've seen it in our small groups. I don't think I've been a part of a small group where I haven't seen at least a little bit of this tendency that when somebody shares something, we want to help offer advice. But overall, our small groups and different meetings are extremely safe because we make sure our priorities are no judging, no fixing, right? So we're here to listen. And what happens is people begin to share a little bit of who they are. It might happen over coffee. It might happen at a small group. It might happen here on Sunday. But when people share a little bit of who they are, they should experience your unconditional love and acceptance, first and foremost. And that's how you create a safe place. And then if somebody asks in a small group, in a meeting, here at church on Sunday, what do you do about this? Have you ever struggled? Now they're inviting you to give your input. Now you can without creating an unsafe place. Is that making sense? So part of this is what we are doing as a community. When somebody reveals a part of you, that is a sacred time to create space. Not to just offer quick feedback, help, advice, but to create that safe place. And that's what we're doing all the time. This is why a couple weeks ago we had Dr. Chandler, who shared, he's an ethics professor, and he shared this idea of conversational ethics. And I thought this is so important for not only our culture, our society, everything right now, because we see such a lack of that. Conversational ethics, just to recap for those of you who weren't here, is this idea that our conversation, our dialogue, our discussions need to be ethical, need to be respectful, that we need to be listening to the other, trying to find out where they're coming from. And that, I thought, captures so much of what we're trying to do here, too. In the midst of all of this chaos, confusion, from the people on the right, on the left, politics, religion, all of these different things, how do we stop and listen to people's stories to understand where they're coming from? Because that's their story, and their story shapes who they are, right? So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create this safe community that reflects the inclusive love of God. And we're doing this together, which means we need your help. Many of you do help in tremendous ways, but it means we need your help to continue to do this. So I am going to throw out an ask today. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I have 2 questions for each of you to wrestle with. On the next slide, first, will you consider giving financially to one church? 2, will you consider volunteering to help us in some way? Now, finances. Like many of you, I have a little PTSD when it comes to church and finances and all this stuff, and I hate talking about finances in church. I just hate it. I grew up in a tradition that whenever they talked about finances, it made it sound like more or less you were under a curse if you didn't give 10% of your gross income. And if you did, that was good, but that was mandated by God. And if you wanted to be really generous, you'd give more. And it's very transactional, right? And the way they would do it, it was really sneaky. And it made me so mad after a while, but they would get people up front and be like, I was struggling with finances for so long, and then all of a sudden I said, Jesus, take the wheel, and I gave you 10%, and now, hallelujah, I am doing so well. And I was like, what? What about everybody else who's struggling and doing that? You know, my mind, again, half of my brain is a skeptic, as I talked last week. And so that's where my mind went. That's not what we're going to do here. So, finances. I think there's a different approach to take, and that's this. If one church means something to you, if it matters, would you consider giving financially on a regular basis? What that is between you and your significant other and your family, if you have a family, and God. 2 Corinthians, Paul's writing to a church in Corinth, and he says this, the point is this, the one who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. The one who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each of you must give as you have made up your mind, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And he's collecting money here. And I think he just simply lays it out. Hey, if you decide to give, decide what's in your heart and just give that. And that's good. That's simple. Doesn't need to be complicated. Right? We don't need to invoke God's wrath or judgment in this thing. And I don't think you should have to. At this point, actually in just a moment, I'm going to invite those who are on the end aisle. Not yet, just wait. Actually, you can go ahead and grab it now, and you can open it, since some of you already went for it. There's that black folder. So what we usually do at the very beginning, if some of you were like, ooh, he forgot that. Nope, I didn't. I remembered. But open up that folder. That's your name and email, if you could put it in there. Also, for those of you who are newer, I send out a weekly email every Friday morning. If you don't get that weekly email of just events, things going at the church, and you'd like to, put a little asterisk by your name. But what we have, or I have placed within those black folders is envelopes. I always get confused saying envelope, I don't know, tomato, tomato. Anyways, grab this white thing, if you would. If you're not a regular attendee, you're visiting, you're new, you're not planning, just feel free to pass this along. No judgment. Don't grab it because you feel bad, even though you know you're not going to come back. It's okay. Nobody's going to say anything. Inside is a card that looks like this. It's a pledge card. So what we do once a year here at One Church, if you're not familiar, is we do a pledge drive. What this is just your information and a commitment that you decide, hey, I would like to financially commit to One Church to give this amount for the next year. We do that because it helps us budget and run finances in a way that we try to be wise stewards. And it lets us know, okay, we have about this much to do for the next year. Does that make sense? So it's very easy. We're not going to complicate it too much. What I would invite you to do is take this. Don't turn it in today. Take it home. Prayerfully consider if you can give, how much you can give. Now, a few thoughts. First of all, if you've been giving to one church, thank you so much. You enable us to do what we need to do. At the beginning of this year, we had a well-known author, Brian McLaren, come in and speak. And afterwards, I took him out to lunch, and I asked him a few questions. And one of the questions I said, because he's been a pastor for like 20-something years. So whenever you get around somebody who's been doing whatever you're doing for a long time, you just learn from them, right? And so I asked him, what is the one thing you regret or wish you would have done differently? And he said this. He said, I wish I would have been more bold and courageous in asking for money. As a progressive person, church and finances are a hard topic because lots of people struggle. I know I'm not alone when I say PTSD in church and finances. I know I'm not alone in that. But he said, it's just a matter of fact. To run an organization of any kind, you have to have money. And I didn't want to address it, which meant that we didn't have near as much money as we could, and it meant that people struggled and suffered, and we could have done so much more because of that. And so here I am learning from Brian McLaren and saying, we need money to run. And if one church matters to you, please consider giving to one church in a financial way. A few other things, and then we'll move past. If you are financially struggling right now, you're in a place, you're at school, whatever it is, and you're financially struggling, please do not feel any pressure to give. I wish people said that when I was sitting in the pews. Like, what about people I know that are struggling, that feel like, oh, if I can't give, then, I can barely afford the bills. Please don't feel any pressure to give. You're in a season of your life. Someday you won't be in that season, and if you're in a different season, then you can think about giving, okay? So if you're in that, you're like, I can't don't feel any pressure. You're a part of us. You're welcome here just as much as everyone else. All right? That just means you have to serve in kids ministry. So finances. By the way, after church today, we have the potluck. And about 12:15, maybe a little after, and once people get settled in, we're going to have an open budget meeting. There's a piece of paper on your way out, right at the info table, that there's a whole stack of them. That's our budget. So we are being open and honest and transparent with where we spend our money. And I can say this with certainty, that half of our staff is volunteer, which, they don't get anything. And the other half of our staff could make a lot more money at another church. So no one's in it for the money. This is not why we're doing this thing, but we want to be transparent. And so we invite you. I hope that if you are considering giving, that you will look at the budget, grab it, please. Also, we'll have an open budget meeting. There's a couple of our board members who will present a little bit of our budget and invite any thoughts, questions, or even ideas. Suggestions for the future. Hey, have you thought about this? Or what about this? Or money towards here? Or I saw this happen one time. Anything. So we're going to do that in the midst of while you guys are eating good Mexican food and you're in the food coma and you're all nice and comfy, that we can talk finances for a little bit. It will go fast. It's not a big deal. We'll probably spend 10, 15 minutes on it. But we want to be open and honest and transparent with what money we bring in and where it goes. And if you're wanting to give, you should care. So please grab that, because it does matter. Second question, will you consider volunteering at one church? The next slide here is some of the areas we need help volunteering. Worship. Matt and Jackie threw out a worship invitation on our Facebook page. If you're a musician, a singer, you want to be a part of the worship in any capacity, reach out to Matt and Jackie. For any of these, by the way, feel free to email me first and I'll put you in touch with them. Also, we're looking for people to help with the soundboard or slides or the live stream. We need at least 1 to 2 more of each of those, and probably at least 3 for the soundboard. We're looking to get somebody to come in professionally to train everybody on soundboard, look at our stuff, and help us out. So if that's you and you're like, I've never done soundboard stuff, I don't know a thing, but it looks kind of cool. You get to sit out here and be a part of the service so you don't miss anything. Just let us know after. Kids ministry, big one, always the biggest need, right? In any place. In any church that I've ever been a part of, there's always the biggest need. We ask for our kids volunteers to help out once a month. Jody and Chester are right up front here. They're our kids directors. They do a wonderful job. We have 2 worship services, this one and the one over there in our kids department. And we have a lot of volunteers. I don't know how many right now, but a good amount. But we're always looking for more. So if you'd like to help, if you're like, I want to hold babies, we'll put you in babies. I want to check in, whatever that is. Greeters, Pam and Ron do an excellent job, but they're not here every Sunday for whatever reason. You guys want to get out of town sometimes. Yeah, okay. So we're looking for other people that might want to help with that. Just help welcome people. Hospitality, Ron and Maria Pedregon do an enormous amount of work. Coffee, snacks, info table, to be here. How do we present? We have a snack sign up. That's hit or miss depending on how on top of it I am, and I slack with that. But we also welcome people to bring snacks every day. We have donuts and coffee and all that, and it helps. We're looking for a couple specific people. Social events coordinator to help us oversee all of the social events that we do. Right now, we want to do every month something for families, something for food, and Becca Green oversees the food, and something fun. And we want to do that on a regular basis. Community service. Can you help coordinate things that we do every month? Feed My Starving Children and Chandler Christian Community Center, now Ascend. Or maybe there's something else that you're passionate about that doesn't exist right now, and you're like, oh, I think this would be neat. Last week or the week before, I talked to a couple people who were like, what about young adults? Like, it'd be fun for young adults to kind of just get together sometimes and hang out. And I said, am I still part of that? But there might be other things. I know Dana has done an amazing job with missions. Came in, it's like, I'm passionate about this. She's coordinated this mission trip. Now we're going to Mexico. We're taking 15 to 20 people to Mexico. We're still, if you're wanting to sign up, you can up until November. But if you want to be a part of that, she's done an amazing job. Thank you. Today, Chrisanna's going to come up here and share a little bit, but she's passionate about telling people stories and capturing those on video and what that might look like. And so all of this to say, we're very open to, if your passion aligns with creating a safe place that reflects the inclusive love of God, figure out a way for you to get involved in some way. This last year has been wonderful. Trying not to get emotional, because I rarely ever do. Last year, actually last Sunday, a year ago, was the Sunday I was ordained and installed as his pastor. And I just look at, dang, I said I wouldn't. I just look at everything that's happened. In fact, I was like, I didn't plan the whole video very well because I was like, oh, it's been a great year. We started a co-ed softball team. But I look, and we started the co-ed softball team and small groups. And we've transitioned, not only just leadership, but where we've met, and you guys have served in amazing, wonderful ways in our community. And that was just a little bit of a glimpse of some of the things. And I look forward to continuing and to doing more in Mexico on our missions trip and in other ways that we find we connect together. We need each other. We need you. We're in this together. So I thought I would end, because you guys are all hungry and want to eat some Mexican food. But I received a letter that I think reflects, I've had lots of conversations with people, and I wish I could communicate to everybody here how much it means to some people when they find a faith community like this. And so what that means is it matters that you're a part of it, that you show up when you can, that you give what you can, how you can, that you serve when you can, that it matters for people. And it was a letter I received on my way to church, and I was like, do I read it now? Because I didn't want, we were like, is it going to be a downer? By the way, you should work on this. But it was a letter from Amarillo, Texas. And so I'd like to just close with reading this. And I asked for permission. They said I could read it. It's addressed, Dear Aaron and leadership team, which is really all of us here. Because you're all a part of this in some way, shape, or form. You all have been a part of this. Please accept this. They actually wrote a chat, too. From afar, my girlfriend and I stumbled upon your YouTube sermons and podcasts while seeking answers to questions about our faith and sexuality. Since finding your church, we have both nearly listened to all the One Church sermons in a little over a month. That is a chore. I haven't listened to all of them. Your openness to questions and doubts, your acceptance of all, and your interpretation of Scripture truly speaks to us. Thank you for that. As neither of us currently has a church home, we would love to have a church like yours nearby. Thank you again. And I thought, these things are like gold, right? In the midst of everything else, and we need more help. We're a small community, so it's like constantly, we need more volunteers, all this. And sometimes it's easy to get sidetracked. It's not about the Sunday morning service. The Sunday morning service holds us all together. It's about everything else that we do together. It's about meeting in small groups. It's about eating good Mexican food. It's about serving our community. And this holds us together and allows us a safe place. Thank you for being a part of that. I'm excited to see what the future will hold. I think we're in a pivotal place. We have a lot of good coming down, invitation for a lot of good to be done in our community as we hold ground for others who are seeking a place like this.